Let me know you can see my screen.
We can see your screen.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. In the last session, Idil told us about FAW, and I will take the topic more broad, especially how do you meet your entire spectrum of reporting and analytics needs when you move to Oracle Cloud applications. So we'll talk about operational and analytical reporting. FAW is primarily focused on analytical reporting. So we'll look at what other options are available to meet the whole set of needs. So we'll look at the problem statement, especially when we go to cloud applications, what are the limitations, what are the differences from the on-prem world. Then we'll talk about sort of decision tree of how do you meet all your reporting needs in the enterprise landscape. We'll look at different ways to extract data. So FAW has one way of extracting the data from the cloud application because it's like a SaaS application, it's all built in. But if you have to build customizations, how do you do that? How do you extract the data from cloud applications? Because you cannot find ETL tools correctly at cloud applications. And that's true in general for any SaaS platform. So we'll look at ways to extract, ways to integrate the data into the warehouse. And then we will also look at the heterogeneous landscape, because many companies may have enterprise data warehouse. It may or may not be on Oracle technology. It may be on a different cloud. It may not even be fully relational. In fact, the next session after me will discuss about Oracle and non-Oracle technologies. So we'll briefly touch on the heterogeneous landscape. Why do you need, or why do customers end up sometimes in heterogeneous environment? And then PaaS extensions. We'll talk about how cloud applications are customized and extended. You do not have the liberty to build new tables and columns into the SaaS environment like you could in your on-prem. So the Oracle has the PaaS extension in OCI. And what does it mean from a reporting standpoint when you have data in a cloud application as well as in the PaaS extension? So a little bit about myself. So I've worked in the industry for about 30 years now with some large companies like Deloitte, Oracle, General Electric, IBM. I was in their Oracle consulting practice. And I started my career way back with Halliburton. I started working with databases back in '94, got certified in different database versions. So that's the OCP logo from the good old days. And then I've kept a lot of my certifications current. Literally on Saturday night, I took the test and cleared the ADW for 2021. I've been a OCI architect professional since 2019. So 2019, 2020, I have the certifications. I've also done a little bit on Azure, on the fundamentals in Azure AI. It's always good to have a perspective of one cloud versus other clouds in the industry. I started speaking at Open World back in 2003. In fact, my very first presentation was on use of Oracle data mining for predicting churn in telecom industry. And back in those days, it was Oracle 9i, and data mining was part of the database from version 9, if I recollect. And as someone else mentioned, I've been involved with Viva, which is the former name of the current community from its day one. So what do I do when I'm not working on Oracle Cloud? I've taken some of that knowledge to the IoT domain. I used to work at General Electric, and I learned a lot about applying Internet of Things to industrial domain. And to share that knowledge, I've written 3 books. Started in 2017. The first book was about architecture of IoT platforms, specifically applied to industrial domains. Last year, wrote a book on industrial digital transformation. And the book that's being released this month is about building digital twins. So all applying basically data analytics, AI, using IoT platform to industrial domain to solve problems. So I'll not be talking about this in the presentation today, of course. So now let's look at the problem statement when we are dealing with Oracle Cloud applications. How do we meet our whole spectrum of reporting and analytic needs in the cloud environment? So we often encounter two common scenarios when companies move to cloud. Either they are moving from legacy applications or on-prem applications such as EBS or PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Siebel, and some combination of other applications on-prem. And they have a fairly mature reporting analytics state. And they're moving maybe one functional area at a time. Maybe they adopt HCM first and then move the rest of the ERP at a later time. Or they might say a certain business unit or a geographical area will adopt the cloud applications. Or in some rare cases, you do see the whole company moving to cloud, not necessarily on the same day, but over a limited period of time. And then we have other set of customers who adopt new cloud applications. They may be relatively small companies growing rapidly. That happens often in the high-tech space. And they never really had a mature ERP. Maybe they adopted NetSuite. Maybe now they're adopting Oracle Cloud application. But they really never had a very mature on-prem ERP and analytics framework. The other scenario we see is when companies are divesting a part of the company. So a bigger company divesting part of the company. And then now the bigger company might be in on-prem ERP application, but it's often very easy to put the divestiture, the smaller part of the company that's been carved out of the bigger company, into its own maybe cloud application and treat it as a sort of greenfield setup, because the divested company will be like a new company. So that's a good place for companies to adopt cloud application while separating from a larger company. And then companies could be moving from SAP or other third-party ERP into Oracle Cloud. So again, that may be a new setup in Oracle Cloud for them, but it may be otherwise a mature company from IT perspective. So now, why is the comparison important? So when we look at operational reporting, the products like e-business suite or other Oracle applications, they always had a fairly well-defined set of operational reporting tools. So EBS folks are well aware of Discoverer from the earlier days, BI Publisher, or for financial or income statement kind of reporting, there is FSG, which is for financial statement generator. Likewise, if you are on PeopleSoft, especially as you know, PeopleSoft has separate databases for HCM or HR and finance, unlike EBS where you have one database. So in the finance world of PeopleSoft, Envision was often a popular reporting tool which could handle things like FSG code, financial statements, and other operational reporting. But across the board in PeopleSoft, both for HR, you had other tools like SQR, PS Query, even third-party tools like Crystal Reports. Same way, JD Edwards had OneView reporting or BI Publisher were commonly used operational tools. So what happened was there were seeded reports, which got them started on these technologies. And then customers could easily modify those reports or create new reports to meet a lot of their operational needs. And since the whole application ran in typically either on premises or even if it was in cloud as a hosted, that full control over the application schema. So they could often create, if there were need for more complex reports, which require data right from the ERP system, they could often write complex PL SQL scripts, create some custom tables, staging tables, temporary tables to massage the data and get the data in the right form. In other words, they almost augmented, in some cases, the OLTP schema, which is normally not optimized for analytical report. They could augment through these temporary tables to get data out in the form they needed. And it was right on top of the operational system, so there was no lag. And this is one need we often hear, that it's not very easy to meet in the cloud world, because you cannot create these temporary tables or write PL SQL scripts, a very custom complex PL SQL scripts. Those are not very easy to do in Oracle cloud application world. And that's true for any SaaS platform, where you're not going to have raw access to the tables, columns, manipulate the data, create new tables, store them right in the application. And that's why even to extend or customize the application, you have the PaaS extensions to the SaaS. So you can only do so much with the user-defined or kind of flex field tables within the application. And then you have to rely on external set of tables and logic to extend that application. And that has implications on operational reporting, because the built-in tools that come with the application can only access the data that is stored in the application. Now, what happens in analytical reporting? So back in the on-prem days, we could build custom data warehouse. We could start with BI applications and customize it. And that was easy because the ETL tool, whether it was Informatica or ODI, we could connect to the application and either use the package adapters like in OBIA, or easily extend them by writing custom logic. We had full access to the schema, and we could go and extract the data as long as we understood how the data was stored in those schemas. Now, there are many limitations or challenges which you have to overcome when you go to the cloud world, because you cannot directly take your ETL tools, even if it's ODI, which is an Oracle tool, and you cannot directly connect it to the SaaS world. And we will look at what are the ways to get around that. Of course, you can take FAW, and FAW, being a SaaS application, will give you the basic connectivity or data integration to SaaS, and you can use the console, as Idil showed, to a certain degree to extend it. But again, if you are looking for a module of functional area that is not covered, let's say projects. Project analytics today is not available. It's on the roadmap. But let's say you have to build project analytics today against a Fusion application or cloud application, then you have to look at a custom route. Likewise, when it comes to latency of data, so historically we have seen data warehouses are great for daily load. We always talk of nightly loads. Yes, you can do intraday, but really getting data which is up to the minute or a slightly delayed near real-time data is always has been a challenge. And the same challenge applies when your ways to connect to the cloud applications are even more limited in the cloud world. So we'll look at some options how to extract data at a required frequency based on the application. So let's next look at sort of high-level architecture of how analytics and reporting works in the cloud world. So if you look at it from the right-hand side where you see the users, they interact or get their information about the state of business through either operational tools or analytical tools. So we looked at FAW, there can be custom versions of it, and then we have the operational tools which come as part of the application. So it's not easy for us to add an operational tool on top of cloud applications because there is limited connectivity for third-party tools. So we often rely on tools that come with cloud applications like BI Publisher, OTBI, FRS, and so on. And we'll look at more details into that. Now, these tools typically connect directly to the data source or to the ERP, whereas all this data processing is typically for the analytical warehouse. So you have to fetch the data in some ways from the cloud application, process it, and eventually persist the data in the data model, which could be a database service, Exadata CS, or in case of FAW, is autonomous data warehouse. So moving along, what are some other changes that have happened as we have moved to the cloud application? So we saw that in the on-prem world, where we talked about EBS, PeopleSoft, and so on, the underlying database was primarily relational. And we still used to have multidimensional or S-based like applications, but they were primarily for Hyperion family of applications like planning application. But the core ERP application relied on relational database. But what Oracle has done in cloud, especially the financial applications, they realized that there is merit in combining the best of both worlds. So the transactional data is best stored in relational database tables, but there are certain types of data like GL module that benefits by storing it in S-Base. Oracle owns the S-Base technology, and by storing the information in multidimensional form, it's possible to get a near real-time view because some of the aggregations in an S-Base cube can be done in near real time. So as a result, and what the advantage it gives you is you can easily see data in various forms of aggregations. You can drill down on the hierarchies. So often we have chart of accounts, which are basically the dimensions to look at your balances or your organization from a financial standpoint. And all those are very easily facilitated in a multidimensional form. So as a result, even in the ERP side, now we end up with multiple tools. A smart view, if you want Excel kind of interface, or for income statement and other kind of street reporting, the FRS becomes available within the ERP suite cloud applications now. So this is kind of one change from moving from on-prem to cloud, where now Oracle is able to use relational and multidimensional underlying its applications. So now let's start looking at the decision tree of various kinds of reporting that we have to keep in mind. So let's say we have a need for reporting. It could be operational or analytical. Let's take the top branch, which is mainly about operational reporting, and your data lies in the Oracle application. So we're not talking about integrating it with any data that resides outside of the cloud application. Yes, there may be integrations to other applications as long as the integrations bring the data. I'm talking about real-time application interfaces. As long as they are bringing the data into the Oracle Cloud application, is persisting it in base tables or user-defined fields, then that data is available in the cloud application. And then you have the provided tools like BI Publisher or OTBI to access that data. And we just looked at financials, where you may use some other tools as well. All of those are available right on top of the platform. Now let's look at the other extreme, which is analytical reporting, where you are typically looking at data over a longer period of time, where you may have certain KPIs defined for your organization. You're looking at yearly trends, year over year, quarter over quarter, and those kind of processing is best done as a batch process, and where you move the data out of the application into a data warehouse, organize it in facts and dimensions. And the two options here are you can use FAW, or you can build a custom solution. And of course, you can blend the two together. You can extend your FAW with custom solution as well. So now let's next look at the similar decision tree for operational reporting. So you have an operational reporting requirement, and typically the data is available to you. So real-time reporting requirements can be met. If it is a need for real-time reporting, then you can use BI Publisher, which is also very appropriate for pixel perfect reporting. So your customer-facing reports could be invoices or any such things where you may need logos or some localizations. All those things are best done in a tool like BI Publisher. If you do not need pixel perfect reporting, the other option is OTBI. OTBI is basically it's like getting the catalog or the metadata of an OBI tool on top of your cloud application. So Oracle prepares these subject areas on top of cloud application and exposes them, and you can build your reports on top of OTBI. And OTBI, being a BI-like tool, provides an easy way for business users to easily learn to get near real-time reporting on top of cloud application data. However, you are limited to the subject areas that Oracle provides. Oracle provides a good documentation, and I've provided the links in this deck where you can go and see what are the subject areas Oracle provides, the documentation. And if your reporting need can be met from that subject area, great. There are scenarios where you can do cross-subject area reporting, but only if there is a conformant dimension. And sometimes it gets tricky if the granularity of data is different in the different subject areas. But at least for single subject area, for business users, this is a very easy way to do self-service reporting, or you can have prepared reports as well. Now, as we traverse this tree, if there is a need for a GL report, then you have options like using the smart view. So if financial analysts often love Excel and they like Excel-like interface, so for financial analysts, if they are looking at GL information, they can use smart view. Or if they have to use the same information to prepare like income statement, profit and loss, balance sheets, and so on, then FRS is a good way for them to build such reports right on top of Fusion Financials or Cloud Financial applications. So this kind of takes care of the operational side of the reporting. Of course, what's not addressed here is we have very complex reporting needs, which cannot be met by either out-of-box or custom reports, let's say through BI Publisher or one of these tools. Then that remains a sort of gap, and you have to extract data out of the system to be able to manipulate in another system. But the moment you extract data from application and go through transformation loaded elsewhere, then the latency becomes an issue. So why does latency matter when you have a complex report? let's say you are preparing some month-end financial reports. Now, typically, month-end reports are needed once a month or maybe once a quarter and so on. Why do we have to worry about real time or near real time? So there are corner cases like end of the month. You may be making changes in your operational system and doing some reconciliation, looking at the impact on the monthly statement. Maybe you made some error, you fix the error. Now you don't want to wait through the whole process. And that's where it gets tricky. So we'll look at different ways to extract data out of the source system in frequency that may help to meet some of those needs to some extent. So now let's extend the same decision tree to the entire gamut of reporting and analytics in an enterprise. And while it may look complex, we will gradually navigate the tree. So let's start here. We have a reporting and analytics requirement. Now we look at where does the data reside. If the data resides in the ERP or in the cloud application, then we have looked at various ways of reporting on top of that, such as if it requires, if it's financial data, if it requires Excel-like interface, you end up in SmartView or in FRS, or if you need pixel perfect reporting, then you can, then you will typically end up in BI Publisher. Otherwise, OTBI might suffice some of these needs. So that's the operational path that we just looked at. Now, if there are scenarios, and this is the EPM or the Hyperion equivalent of the cloud, where typically the tools that come on top of EPM are SmartView, EPM dashboards, Financial Reporting Studio, as well as narrative reporting. So that's another capability for EPM that helps, especially in financial reporting, and add narrative to reports. Now, let's look at this path, which is where the analytical reports, reporting requirements are met. And we show here two destinations. So FAW and custom version of FAW, so staying on the Oracle ecosystem. And then in some cases, there may be reasons where you do not end up in an Oracle ecosystem and may end up in either a fully custom solution, it could be Oracle on, let's say, on Exadata or Exa Cloud Service, or could be even a non-Oracle relational, non-relational database solution for your enterprise data warehouse, especially when you may have a mix of technologies. Oracle clouds, Oracle applications or ERP may not be the only one in your organization. You may be a mix of Salesforce, Ariba, SuccessFactors, and other smaller custom applications. So we see larger enterprises having a share of non-Oracle and Oracle applications. And sometimes they end up in enterprise data warehouse, which is able to blend data from all these different sources in one place, relational, non-relational, and so on. So that's a solution that's often found in large organizations. And interestingly, the talk after this talks about various technologies like comparing ADW with Snowflake, which is another technology often seen for use as enterprise data warehouse. So if we stay on the Oracle path, then FAW, which provides pre-built integration to Oracle applications, is one option. You may have to customize that, or you can fully build a custom solution by extracting data from Oracle applications. So next few slides will focus on ways to bring data from Oracle application. Yeah, so I'll skip over this. It talks about OTBI, which is on the operational side, and the Oracle Analytics Cloud, which is an analytical tool running on the Oracle Cloud. And there are some similarities and differences between the two, which are summarized here. So now let's look at Oracle Analytics Cloud, which is a PaaS technology, and it has connectors. It can connect to ADW or other applications. FAW is a combination of OAC on top of ADW from an architecture perspective. OAC can also connect to subject areas in SAS through OTBI. So that gives a lot of flexibility to use the power of OAC by being able to extend the pre-built subject areas. You can logically extend them in OAC. And that's pretty much as close to real time you can get in OAC by connecting to OTBI through connecting to SAS through OTBI. And this Oracle applications connection facilitates the connection of OAC to OTBI subject areas. And then there are a variety of other connectors which are used to facilitate custom OAC on top of other data sources. So let's quickly look at the architecture of a custom solution. Unlike FAW, if you have to build a custom solution, you can extract information out of cloud applications using BI Cloud Connector into, let's say, an object store. Then you can load it into data warehouse, and then obviously use your BI technology on top of that. There are a variety of integration technologies available, such as you can use OIC to orchestrate this, because OIC doesn't have to do heavy lifting. It is basically orchestrating the data flow, because you are extracting as flat files from Oracle Cloud through BICC. And then you can use ADWs or PL SQL, basically cloud packages, to read the data into ADW from object store. Of course, your data manipulation from temporary table, staging table to fact dimensions will have to be handled in the data warehouse. Or you can use ODI from Marketplace, run it as a ETL tool in its own VM, and do the heavy lifting of manipulation in ODI. So those are some options available. And this is a logical way of bringing data from cloud application, keeping the source dependent part separate from the source independent part, which is a good practice we have seen in BI applications as well. And the same thing you can do by bringing the data, loading it into temp, then transforming it into stage, and then loading your facts and dimensions. So as we look into this, BICC becomes a very important tool for extracting the data in custom format from cloud application, and it can be easily configured to extract data, metadata, and different files as flat files. These files can be directly brought to object store in OCI, or for customers who do not use Oracle Cloud infrastructure, they can use the UCM to get these data to on-prem, other cloud, and so on. So those are different options. Now, while BICC is one way of extracting data through what is known as PVOs, or public view objects, which are basically logical extensions of the underlying tables in ERP, BI Publisher can sometimes be used as an extraction tool. And there are few differences. These are basically one-to-one mapping of the underlying tables as the view objects. But in BI Publisher, you have the flexibility to write SQL to join or limit certain information. You might already have an operational report. We talked about complex reports. So you may have a few reports written in BI Publisher, which could be used to extract information. And then you can manipulate, load it into data warehouse and manipulate the data. So that's another option where BI Publisher acts like a data extraction tool. And there are some comparisons between using the two. Of course, BI Publisher is not meant to be a data extraction tool, so there are more stringent limitations so that you don't choke your application, cloud application. And BICC is more optimized for high volume extractions of data extractions out of the application. But either a combination of these two gives you a lot of flexibility. So how is BICC used? You set up the extractions, you decide where to bring it, and then you schedule it for full and incremental loads. And you can extract as much as hourly and load it into the data warehouse. So FAW by default allows daily incremental loads. There are on-demand ways to load smaller areas, but it's still today meant to be a daily or a nightly kind of a load. Whereas through BICC, at least the custom areas can be augmented with data that can be, let's say, an hourly to give you more inter-day kind of reporting options. So these are screenshots from BICC to look at how you choose your tables through the PVOs. You go into the offering and the subject area from the application, and you can bundle what set of tables you want to extract as a group, as full load, incremental load. This is another area, assignments, and this is one way to package your extractions from the cloud side. And you get the data, metadata, and other associated information, which is useful for consuming those files. How do you go about finding what PVOs to select? Oracle provides documentation where these are Excel lineage kind of documentation. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. Let me go back. Okay, so I have screenshots of Excels where you can basically select from the drop-down what view object to use. You can see what database columns, what database table it will extract, what columns it will extract. For instance, here it will only extract the core columns, not the sort of attribute or flexible columns. Usually there is a BICC in the name of the PVOs, which are one-to-one mapping. These are mostly created for allowing you to extract the raw table data. But there can be other scenarios where there are other PVOs for other purposes, which may be joining different tables. So you have to look at this documentation to decide which ones is most appropriate. The best way is to do the BICC ones, which gives you the one-to-one mapping to the underlying table. I have included a lot of links to documentations to see, to help you with that process, because there are PVOs, as I said, which may be joining other things, may have where clauses, so you can look what is happening behind the scenes. Now, the final topic before I close is what happens when you build custom extensions. So in the on-prem world, you could often, as part of ERP implementation, you could often customize the application. Sometimes you may add new tables and maybe extend the columns if the flex fields and user-defined columns did not meet the need. But all those stayed in the same application schema. And the ETL tool could be configured to bring the same data. But in the cloud world, there are guardrails because it's kind of a shared environment. So the custom extensions typically end up using tools like VBCS, Visual Builder Cloud Service with ATP or any database, or Apex with ATP. So you end up with extension of your cloud application in PaaS. That means part of your cloud application data is now sitting in, let's say, ATP or some other database. And now, when you build an analytical solution, you have to make sure you're not only getting the data through, let's say, BICC extract from the application, cloud application, but you're also getting the data from the PAS extension and mixing and merging the data so that it makes sense for reporting. And that onus lies on you. FAW will not be aware of PAS extensions because it is wired for data integration from the standard delivered capability. So that is something you have to be aware of when you when cloud implementation has built PAS extensions. So to wrap up, we looked at what is our problem statement when we come to cloud from an analytical and operational reporting standpoint. What are some of the challenges, especially compared to on-prem world, and what are some of the options available to us to overcome those? And we can open it up for questions.
Thanks, Shyam. Yes, we do have some questions in here, and we'll have to go through quickly. If we don't have a chance to go through all the questions, and suggest maybe you
can answer
them during
some
the break.
of them in the Slack. Yeah, but
yep.
Let's take
Do you know what's the best way to extract data from Fusion ERP so it would be consumed by OAC? Pulling from OTBI analyses works great when they are available subject areas, but what can we do when our Fusion ERP data resides on tables only?
Yeah, so those two options we looked at, I will quickly jump to that slide, which is these two options. So BICC is the recommended option to extract cloud data, and through the PVOs, public view objects, you have pretty much one-to-one mapping for most of the underlying tables. You can extract them into object store or to content management, or certain tables you could, if you have BI publisher reports, you can extract them. Unlike OTBI, which is out of the box, BI publisher, you can write your own reports. You can basically write SQL to some extent and extract them and then load it into your data warehouse.
Okay, great. Another question is, what's the turnaround time with this? It looks similar to what we did when we first implement OBIEE. For us, it takes too long to go through all these steps and getting end result to the user.
So if you want to start a custom implementation, let's say cloud for one functional area, we have done that in 10 to 12 weeks, because extracting data for, if you're building, let's say, one functional area, let's say project analytics is not available in FAW, you have a few facts you have come up for projects, you have identified what tables to extract. This process is very visual. You extract the data into Cloud Store as flat files, and now you have to write either through ODI or even through PL SQL and cloud packages, because ADW has direct access to Cloud Object Store to populate your fact table, and you point your OAC. So in 10 to 12 weeks, it can be done for one functional area. Or of course, FAW can get you jump started if that applies. And of course, there are the cost implications, because FAW is based on number of users, whereas a custom solution like this is sized by OCPUs. So there may be differences in cost of ownership.
Yep. Another question, OAC cannot properly export to Excel. I saw that you have Excel coming out from OAC. How? With SmartView?
Well, so my slide was more inputs. So I had a slide where OAC was pointing to ADW and custom data warehouse or Excel. So that was more an example of data blending where you can easily bring data from different sources to analyze in OAC. And I would defer, since it's a product question, I would defer about export friendliness of OAC to a product manager rather than try to give a guess.
Okay. And I think at this point, we need to start transitioning. Shyam, if I would just ask you to look at the Q&A and handle some of the other questions that have come up. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And of course, we love to have you part of ANDOUC as kind of the founding father of all of this. So thanks for sharing all of that on this ANDOUC TechCast Days.
Thank you very much.